Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video where we are just a day away from the Timeless Children. So I've got a couple of videos coming up today. This first one I felt was a good opportunity to just sort of look back at what we've seen so far in this series, if there's any hints and clues in previous episodes, but just generally kind of recapping what we've had so far in Series 12 ahead of tomorrow's finale. Later I will be doing a proper breakdown preview of what to expect from the Timeless Children tomorrow, so do look out for that this evening. But yeah, let's get stuck with this video, and where I'm just going to kind of run through each episode or what's happened in Series 12, just very briefly, and kind of just remind you guys of anything you may have forgotten and stuff that's going on, really. So yes, the series started what feels like, well, for me, both ages ago and also no time ago, when we started with Spyfall Part 1 back on New Year's Day 2020. I can't really believe that it's been 2 months since the first episode. It feels like it really has flown by. But yeah, we started with Spyfall, the big opening, epic two-part story to open the series, featuring Lenny Henry playing a character, Stephen Fry playing a character, and then of course the shock reveal at the end of the episode that the Master was back in the form of Sacha Dhawan, in one of the best Master reveals in a very long time. It felt like a generally pretty strong and positive start to the series, where it felt quite action-packed and exciting. Of course, with that big twist, setting up all the things for both the second part of the episode and later in the series, with the whole everything you think you know is a lie line, which we still actually haven't had resolved, but we should do tomorrow in the Timeless Children. Certainly I remember there being very much an air of positivity around the show after that first part, because it just felt like after a year off, Doctor Who was back, and it really was back with a bang, back with something very exciting, a little bit of James Bond elements in the episode as well. It just felt like it had a real scale and sort of epicness to the story, I think, that was just so perfectly topped off by reintroducing the Master to the programme. And that continued into part 2 of the story, which focused on a sort of covering various historical periods, going into World War II and meeting Noor Khan and Ada Lovelace back in the 1800s, as well as almost sort of the Doctor and the Master are chasing each other around past history to try and find out what's going on with the Kasavin, these weird shape-shifting, not necessarily shape-shifting, but creatures that kind of can go through walls or anything, who are from some sort of alternative universe or dimension, and we find out, of course, working with the Master. It's quite, I think, very much an exciting, not quite in the same way as the first part. It's not got quite the big epic action scenes, I think, of the first part, but it very much continues in a really interesting vein throughout the story, with still lots of excitement to push you through. Maybe the resolution was a little bit not so great, because it was kind of just explained on screen rather than shown. It was just kind of dialogue that was said to solve everything, which is always a little bit of a shame, but it still, I felt, was a pretty strong end to that two-part story. And of course, the end of that episode, part 2, was the moment where we set up the season arc with the whole fact that Gallifrey had been destroyed by the Master, or at least seemingly by the Master, that's what he said, and the whole mystery, the lie of the Timeless Child, would finally be revealed. Something that we first heard in the Ghost Monument back in episode 2 of series 11, and something that I think we're finally going to get the answer to in tomorrow's episode. But yes, this is where the seeds were really sown. We got our first little flashback shot of some young girl somewhat in some far distant place that apparently the Doctor had sort of forgotten from her memories, essentially, and it was starting to come back, I think, was the impression we got. And yes, left us very much wondering and theorising and very intrigued about what to expect for the rest of the series. Now, that all kind of came crashing down in episode 3 of the Orphan 55, which was pretty widely panned for being fairly awful in most regards. It had annoying side characters, a pretty average plot, and a terribly preachy speech at the end about how we need to look after our planet better, because otherwise we're going to end up destroying it, and all of us are going to evolve into the dregs, who are, well, sort of weird, vicious creatures, essentially, that evolve from humans. Yes, so after the momentum built by the first 2 episodes, it was a real shame to see it kind of crash and burn in episode 3, with what looks like a reasonably good episode on the surface. Before you watched it, it sounded like, oh, it's fairly interesting. We're going to some sort of like Tranquility Spa, I think it was called, some weird holiday destination, very sort of alien sci-fi. It could be quite good. Written by Ed Heim, who wrote It Takes You Away as well. Again, a really good story, well, I thought, and I thought, okay, it's going to be pretty good. And then it just turned up being so kind of average and disappointing. All the side characters were a bit of a waste of time. Of course, the infamous Benny throughout the story said, goodness knows how many times, I don't even want to think about it. And yes, that terribly preachy speech to finish it off just kind of topped off what was a really disappointing episode after the opening two-parter. But I think I would still say that was very much the low light of Series 12, and from there, everything has been better than that at the very least. So we carried on through into episode 4, which was Nikola Tesla's Night of Terrors, or Night of Terror even, when we met Nikola Tesla, the great inventor from the early 1900s, and also meeting Thomas Edison, and coming across this alien race called the Skithra, who kind of looked a bit like the Rachnos, and their leader was played by Angela Mahindra, who played Rani in Zero Dawn Adventures. But we'll ignore that. They were still, I guess, an all-right villain who kind of just stole bits and bobs from other races to kind of power themselves. Basically, their spaceship was stolen, bits and bobs of them were stolen. They wanted to use Nikola Tesla's great mind, I think, essentially to help them win a war or get back to power and supremacy and whatever. And, well, the Doctor brings them to Earth, tricks them, and defeats them in a pretty straightforward way. Again, it was a shame, I think, after Spyfall Part 2, where we got such a big revelation about the Timeless Child, what could the mystery of the Timeless Child and Gallifrey, that, again, it feels like it's almost completely forgotten. In Orphan 55, it was basically completely forgotten. And in the Tesla episode, there's pretty much one very brief reference where the Doctor says, "I know how it feels to have my planet destroyed," or something like that. And that's basically it that we get for the whole episode. Certainly, the Tesla episode is a lot stronger and sort of, again, signifies the strength that Doctor Who has been in the last couple of series in terms of the historical episodes, where I think all the historicals were pretty strong in Series 11, and that continued through to Series 12 as well. In some ways, it was reasonably straightforward Doctor Who, I guess you'd say. Like, there wasn't anything, they weren't trying to do anything revolutionary with the plot, but it still felt it worked fairly effectively as a story. And then we come to Fugitive of the Judoon, the 5th episode of Series 12, the episode that got everybody talking. Even people who hadn't watched Doctor Who for a long time, I think, were talking about this episode because it had such major revelations, repercussions, excitement from it going throughout the episode, really. We thought it was just going to be a simple, basic Judoon story where they're chasing some fugitive down. They're a fairly almost comedic alien. There's nothing particularly major about them. Like, it's going to be just another standard mid-series inconsequential episode. Oh, how we were wrong. So yes, this episode reintroduced Captain Jack Harkness first off, which was in the end not even the sort of main major point of this episode, which in any other episode would have been huge news. And it was big news, but it still felt like it was actually ultimately overshadowed by everything else that happened in this episode. It was great to see him, but it was a shame that he was basically just a tiny cameo where he didn't really do anything. He just added some mysterious exposition, or some exposition of some mysterious, ominous words about the future, which the Doctor then ignores in episode 8 anyway, about the lone Cyberman. I'm sure that Jack will come back. I think he'll come back for the special after Series 12, which may not be till Christmas, but I'm pretty sure he will come back. But it was nice to see him, just a shame he wasn't really used very well. But yes, then of course we got the character of Ruth, who we weren't really expecting too much from. I think going into this episode, she seemed to just be some human that was a tour guide and was rather scared of the Judoon when they turned up. But it turned out that she was the fugitive that was being hunted down, and that actually she was the Doctor, that she had been chameleon arched to become a human to hide from the Time Lords, essentially, who were trying to chase her down, and obviously she makes it to this lighthouse. She gets her essence of it as a Time Lord back. We find a TARDIS, a police box buried underground next to it, which is just a crazy great reveal. And we find out that she is a Doctor. She is the Doctor. Of course, we still have a million questions about all of that, like where did she fit in? How is this even possible? Why is the TARDIS a police box? It doesn't all make any sense. Hopefully, maybe, possibly, we'll get some more explanations of that in tomorrow's episode. I'm not convinced, I guess, unless it turns out that the Ruth Doctor is the Timeless Child in some form and that directly links together. I kind of struggle to see exactly whether we're going to see the Ruth Doctor in tomorrow's episode or whether that will be left over to Series 13, because Chris was very clear in saying that there were going to be plot strands that carry over to the next series. It won't all be resolved in this finale. But yeah, certainly this was a huge, exciting development that I really did get everybody talking and excited about the programme when we got a brand new Doctor suddenly thrown in our faces out of nowhere, which is just really, really exciting, to be honest, and I think really kind of got everybody set up for an exciting second half of the series. And in many ways, I feel like this is where the next couple of episodes of the series kind of struggled, was after the massive high shock excitement of episode 5 that in many ways we weren't really expecting because it was just a standard mid-series episode. You've suddenly set those heights so high for the shock and excitement of it that when we go to Praxeus episode 6, where it feels like a pretty bog-standard Doctor Who episode again, where there's nothing connected to the arc even remotely, there's no reference to the Ruth Doctor or anything that happened in episode 5, it can kind of feel like such a letdown in comparison, I think, when we've come off the back of that and there's such such a momentum and excitement around the show, you really need to carry that on. Or at least just drop some hints in there or something, rather than just having a story straight after that that's completely self-contained, got nothing to do with any sort of arc, any reference, any mention at all, which, yeah, I think was just kind of not what the show needed in that moment, I think. And it's not to say that on its own it's a bad episode, because I think the Praxeus is a pretty solid episode. Like, it's nothing special, but it is nice to see some real scale to the programme again. That's something that I think Series 12 has done a very good job of generally, in having a really large scale. They covered a lot of different places around the globe. It felt quite fast-paced and exciting and interesting. I think it was a shame there wasn't a real sort of visual alien monster we saw in there. It was rather just a pathogen that another alien race had accidentally sort of basically created that was killing them all. So they brought it onto Earth and tried to test it on Earth to try and find an antidote for it, which is obviously a terrible thing for an alien race to do. But it was a shame that they were just a human-looking alien race rather than anything else. I know there were rumours of the Sea Devils. I'm not convinced that was ever actually going to happen, but there were rumours around that, which probably would have just pushed the episode up, I think, if it actually happened. And so then we were starting to move towards the end of the series now with episode 7 called Can You Hear Me, which focused on 2 immortal characters that were kind of creating nightmares for all the fam and various people, which was quite an interesting idea to have these immortal creatures in the sort of same way of the Eternals or the Toymaker they were even referencing as well, which was quite cool, or the Guardians from 82 as well. And I really liked the sort of setting the main villain. I thought he was really, really cool and really effective, and it had some really great moments with the Doctor. It was just a shame that they were kind of defeated so easily in this episode. It was just suddenly Zack the Sonic Screwdriver, bam, 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 you're trapped in this ball that's holding 2 worlds apart, and that's it, the end of the episode. Well, not the end of the episode, but that's it, the end of the main plot line. Then we got this slightly shoehorned in character development, where particularly for Yaz in this episode, where we finally learn a bit about her backstory, where she seemingly was planning to either at least run away from home, if not kill herself. And then some police officer basically stopped her from doing that, talked her out of doing that, and that's why she became a police officer. And so it does complete a few sort of references and mentions in the previous series in particular, where she talked about being bullied as a child and things like that. It was quite, in some ways it worked quite well, but I also felt like this was the sort of scene you needed a series earlier, rather than having at the end of series 12, nearly 2 series into that companion. I feel like it just would have worked a whole lot better if it had been in the last series. And so from there we take it to episode 8, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, which we thought was just going to be a kind of exciting Frankenstein Mary Shelley episode, but in reality turned out to be the kind of prequel to the finale, if that's not a bad way to do it, because of course we got the introduction of the lone Cyberman midway through this episode, which was extremely exciting to see. We'd been warned about it by Captain Jack. We met this absolutely ruthless Cyberman that was desperate to get this Cyberium, this AI that contained all sort of cyber strategy, planning, victories, history, all of that that he could then use to kind of to create the ascension of the Cybermen once again. And it was just a really, really exciting episode, I found, with some really sort of great sci-fi concepts and haunted house type vibe to it, where you get trapped in different rooms, and then the introduction of the Cyberman in it as well, and really setting up the finale, having a brilliantly strong performance from the Doctor as well. Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, I thought she was absolutely on form to the maximum in that episode, and we really just saw a new type of Cyberman that had a real threat and a purpose and a goal, and it was so exciting to see that, and really, yeah, as I say, set things up so well for the finale. And so yes, then we came to last week's episode, Ascension of the Cybermen, where, well, the Cybermen race are being kind of reborn, essentially, a lot with Ashad, the lone Cyberman, leading the way, finding himself on a cyber warrior ship where he's raising all these cyber warriors back to life after they've been defeated in the past, all these dormant ones he's going to bring back to life to be able to use to kind of take over the universe, I guess, and become the greatest, the rulers of the whole galaxy, I think is kind of his idea. We also got the very bizarre and mysterious plotline about Brendan in this episode, who we still don't know anything about, and I know I did my theory video on could he possibly be the Doctor. Certainly that would be quite interesting if it was, and I'm sure we'll find out more about that tomorrow, but that was the kind of confusing plotline of this episode, I think it's fair to say. And then the final moments of this episode, setting up the return of Gallifrey through this mysterious boundary that is, of course, still destroyed, and the Master is back, ready to reveal the secrets, tell the Doctor why everything she thinks she knows is a lie, and finally we'll find out what these lies that we've been told for so long are going to be revealed and what the real truth is. That's all we're going to find out in tomorrow's episode. So yes, overall, so far, I think it's been a pretty good series. It's been up and down to an extent, with the lows of Orphan 55, Praxeus being a bit disappointing among other things, but also the real highs of the Spyfall 2-parter, Fugitive of the Judoon, and the last couple of episodes, in my opinion. And I think it all sets up things really, really well for the finale. It's great compared to series Series 11 to just have lots of things to talk about, lots of theories to create in regards to a series. There's been a real arc to it and a really exciting thing to look forward to in the finale as well. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this quick little video, just catching you up on anything you may have missed. The story so far of Series 12, of course. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Series 12 so far and any predictions you have for tomorrow's finale. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As always, hit that like button, that's subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.